G'day, my name's Matt Griffith. Welcome to another journey, and it's my great pleasure to welcome former AFL player, youth advocate and proud Yorta Yorta Duduroa man, Derek Murray, into the studio. Derek, hello.
Thank you, Matt. Thanks for the introduction. To get a phone call a couple of weeks ago to be asked to be part of the journey. Very special moment, especially post a very big weekend for the family with my dad being inducted to the Victorian Aboriginal Honour Roll at the Arts Centre in Melbourne. So it's really fitting to have this conversation today.
Fantastic. Yeah. All right. Well, let's learn all about you and your journey. So we always kick off in the same way, and that's to talk about the connection to the area, a little bit about your background and connection with Albury-Wodonga or the region generally.
Yeah, so the connection there wasn't initially a connection with Albury-Wodonga until the early 80s. So Mum and Dad lived in a town called Balranald, and then there was in 1980 there was a big resettlement scheme for Indigenous families for better education and work and schooling. So Mum and Dad made the decision to pack up and move to Albury, and a lot of the aunties and uncles ventured to Albury as well in those early 1980s. And we moved to Alexandra Street in East Albury. And then from there, all the family filtered in. And then from there, Albury's become home. And got some beautiful children who love Albury also, because I think it's a middle of obviously Melbourne and Sydney, where you want to go down and watch the footy, can jump on the train, go for a burn down the Hume Highway, and then Sydney as well, which is not too far. So and we got the Falls Creek, and we got the river, and we got the lake. So we're very fortunate, and we get 4 seasons, which is fantastic as well.
Yeah, agreed. So how old were you when you moved here?
I was 1.
You were just 1?
Yeah. So just 1. So moved here, and
it's really all you've ever known personally has been.
That's correct. Yeah, that's correct. So that's all I've pretty much known is Albury, and Albury for myself has been a place of connection. Growing up and not knowing a lot of my Aboriginality initially growing up, but then living in a home with two strong Indigenous leaders, being my mum and dad, Alan and Jenny, who were the forefront of being connected to not just self but your community, your Aboriginality, and they are real leaders and stalwarts when it came to connection to Albury. But then they ventured over to Wodonga, and that's where they live today. Yeah.
Oh, terrific. How would you describe your kind of formative years? Obviously, there's a growing passion for the world of sport with Australian rules footy, but what else tickled your fancy at a young age?
I classify myself as a people person, Matt, more than anything. I love having a chat. I love getting around people. I love being involved as much as I possibly can, and just being, being someone who can just actually go out and have a go at anything, really. AFL was my number one targeted sport, but realised growing up that I was, anything I sort of applied myself to, I was all right at. But Albury is a place, Albury-Wodonga is a place where, you can, there's so many sports out there today that myself and my children now can, become anything. And that's not even on the sporting field. It's in their academic life. There's so many opportunities out there today that my children and other people's children, if if they put their little minds to it, they can, they can have a fair income successful career, and a career can be very diverse, can take you places and here, there and everywhere, just like myself. I've had numerous jobs over my career, but the one I'm sitting in at the moment, I sit very comfortably in what I do.
Yeah, and we're certainly going to get to that, your advocacy for youth and connection. But first, let's go back to the footy.
Yep.
So you were obviously an incredibly talented youngster. You went through the bushies.
Yep.
Did you play a bit in the O&M before you got to the AFL as well, or was it straight through the youth?
It was pretty much I was playing in the under-16s at North Albury, and then then I started playing bushies at underage, so as a 16-year-old, and then crossed over to Lavington. And when there were buys, I would go and play for Lavi whilst we had buy, which was 1 or 2 during the year. But predominantly from the 16 to the 18 mark, I was playing Murray Bushrangers week in and week out, which put a lot of pressure on mum and dad because there was a lot of travel, especially every Thursday would cruise up the highway to Wang and train every Thursday, come back at about 9:30, 10 o'clock at night, then have to go to school the next day and stuff like that. So mum and dad done a lot of hours and a lot of travel hours, and finances as well. And the best thing about it, Matt, back then, I don't think I heard my mum and dad, whinge or complain about finances at all back then. It was like, if that's what you want to do, mate, well, we'll make sure that we do everything possible to make that happen. And I'm very thankful for that because at the end of the day, I did make it. So I put a lot of credit and a lot of thanks towards my parents.
It's interesting that the sacrifice of parents, it also can affect siblings as well. Do you have any siblings?
Yeah, so I'm the oldest of 4. So my younger brother Alan, aka Budge. So he got drafted over to Port with me. I was going to my 3rd year, and if it's okay, I call him Budge. Budge got drafted in 2000, and we spent 2 years together. And then we got delisted the same year. And then he came back and he had to reassess what was going on in his life and what he still wanted to do. And he got rookie listed to St Kilda, and then got picked up on the list with St Kilda. And then I've got my other younger brother, Matty, who lives here in Albury as well. He was the hands-on guy. So he's a fitter and turner by trade. He owns his own business, and is very, very good at what he does. He was a footballer, but he was someone that just loved being a country footballer more than anything, and that's nothing against him at all. But and then my little sister, Leila, she's up in Sydney doing her thing. So we're all gone in little different ways and stuff like that. But I feel that we're all very successful in our own little right. So,
must have been an incredible level of sacrifice with the 2 kids playing at a high level and going on for more. I mean, your parents just must have put a lot of themselves aside for the kids. Yeah,
they did, mate. And that's the thing. Like we try and celebrate mum and dad all the time and say, it's we don't talk more about dad than mum right next to him sort of scenario, or talk about mum too much without dad next to him, because they were a team. They're still happily married. They're still together, which, we as children really try and take a leaf out of their book, especially the years they grew up in their adolescence, and their schooling life and being Indigenous back then, the 50s and the 60s and stuff like that. So we make sure as children we make sure we stand strong on country and make sure that no matter what we do, we try and make mum and dad really proud, and we're instilling that in all our children as well. I've got 4 babies. Alan's got 4, Maddie's got 2, and Leila's got 2. So we make sure that when we have conversations, to make sure that we reiterate the sacrifices that mum and dad done for us, and they are the leaders within our family unity or our family group. But hats off to those guys. They're sensational.
That's amazing. All right, now we're going back to a time where nowadays you hear a lot about AFL clubs and supporting youngsters and making sure that they have potentially a career outside of footy to ease them into the system. Back in the late 90s, it was a very different world, and you were hurled into the world of AFL footy with Port Adelaide in a sink or swim environment. What was that like? Straight from the bushies, you won a Morris medal, which meant you're the best in the bushies for that year. What did it feel like getting thrown into Port Adelaide?
Yeah, mate, funny. It's a pretty worldly experience, mate. It was. To watch the draft on TV, and then your name get read out, which within 2 days we had a guy called Rob Snowden come over within 2 days on the plane to introduce himself, and I think it was a footy manager at that stage, come and meet the family and stuff, and then 2 days later I was on the plane flying out of Albury to Port. I still remember the first session, so I was pretty much off the plane straight to Alberton Oval, and they were doing suicides. So if you know what suicides are, that's a really gut-wrenching run, and yeah, vomited everywhere because when you think about as an 18-year-old, you're reasonably fit, and when you come to the AFL, it's a totally different fitness. So, but to rock up and be around my Aboriginal idols, growing up with the likes of Gavin Wanganeen and Che Cockatoo Collins and Shane Bond and Peter Burgoyne and all those guys, it was if you don't know, Matt, when it comes to it, brothers, and when we talk about Indigenous brothers, it doesn't matter where you're from, who you are, all that kind of. There's just always connection. And it was really cool, within a week or two, I felt like I was at home. Especially Fabian Francis really took me under his wing. He was like a massive father figure for me way back then because there was a bit of homesickness for sure. I was with the host family for the first year, just outside of Adelaide near Norwood, and that was good. But then you just want to, turning 19, want a little bit more independence. Didn't want to come home to the family home when there were other children there and stuff like that. So, and the commute from Norwood out to Port Adelaide was a bit of commute. So they owned a house near Alberton. So then I moved in there with another rookie. That was really cool. That was really fun. And then was in the in the area of purchasing my own little unit, which I did at Semaphore. But yeah, the support networks way back then. They were good, but when you don't know, you don't know. So back then I was thinking that, everything's all good, and if I can go and talk to somebody, I can. They did have psychologists and psychiatrists and all that kind of stuff, but it was sort of the unknown, mate. But because when you look at it now, the support networks they do now is how it should be all the time. But I think way back then they were still trying to find their way and trying to find their feet in regards to welfare of the player, and now it's pretty much the forefront of every football club, the player welfare stuff, not just mentally, it's psychology, psycho as well, and financially as well, because you want to leave the system in a reasonably good state. And when I left, I didn't have that. When I got delisted, I was very financially unsecure. I didn't have an income. That sort of gets all null and voided when you're delisted. But what they did back then as well, I think they still do today, is they'd put away some money for when you do get delisted. I think it was about $8,000 to $10,000 a year. They put into like a savings account. So you got that after a year after you get delisted, because you had to actually, back when I got delisted, you had to apply for the draft and not get drafted to receive the cash, pretty much. So I had to do that. So I had to apply for the draft after I got delisted, and then you don't get get drafted again, and then they release the funds. But it's still at this stage, I was still trying to find my feet. I fell into depression, and was in a really bad place there for about 18 months. Doing things I wasn't supposed to do, very unreliable, never would pick up the phone, reply to people, and just honestly tell people what was going on really. Definitely the black dog was chasing me, and very fortunate. We've got a really strong family in our little family unit, and they sat me down and said, "What's going on, mate?" And that opens some doors, and with that opens some scars, and you just get to the point where you have to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
And I was that, and
Yeah.
and that's where I got into start getting into the youth advocacy stuff, because I had been there, so I've got a story, and a lot of kids can relate to a story, especially when you just want to just talk. It's not an effort. You just have a chat, and I'm massive on having a chat. And telling my story.
Well, because I often think, I mean, we're so, I mean, it's almost like, we look at statistics, and we look at players and we treat players like they're not human sometimes, and we just look at stats and we go, say, this player only had 10 to 20 games in the AFL. Oh, well, and then we'll look for our next player, But there's so many stories around that. I mean, first of all, the skill to get there, and then the experience during the actual career, however long it went for in the AFL system. Yep. That's its own completely different world. And then you just kind of cast aside. And I would imagine just saying, well, what the hell next? I'm in my early 20s. My whole life has been about football. And suddenly I'm told, no, you've got to go and find something else.
You hit it on the head, mate. That's exactly what happened. Like you mentioned before, I had a really successful junior career. And even that in itself was pretty special, not just for myself, but my family. Like I was talking about with mum and dad and the sacrifices, not just travel time, but, finances and stuff as well, to even do that. And then to get drafted, which was a childhood dream. But during those years, being told that I won't make it because I'm too little in height and in weight, that I won't make it. And then for that to happen, it's like, I done it. So I'd, done the old middle finger sort of scenario to all those critics, and do that, which was, really, really cool. And then in the system, the AFL system, going really, I thought I'd done reasonably well. If it wasn't playing AFL, I was having some really good games with South Adelaide in the Sandful. And then, like you said, post AFL, to be delisted, there was a phone call and said my services are no longer required.
Yeah. And how long did the process of, I would imagine you went through the 5 stages of grief, I would imagine.
No, definitely. 100%.
How long did that whole process take?
Well, I stayed in Adelaide for a little bit longer, but I realised that I needed to be back home, which was Albury. And when Indigenous people talk about connection to country and country's home, which is, your hometown. So I missed that. So I needed to be back. I had a partner from Adelaide at the time, who's my eldest daughter is with. So she moved back here, and then things didn't work out for us, and she moved back to Adelaide with my daughter, and then had a long distance relationship with my eldest daughter, which wasn't the greatest, and a lot of it I would say my fault, because I was still going through that grief process, and in depression, sitting in it, and not knowing what it is, what it's about. And, I've only spoken honestly about this, the last, 5 or 6 years, Matt. It's something that you think of it as, men don't cry, we don't talk about our emotions and all that kind of stuff. And now I'm more than happy to talk about it. And if people want to get into the nitty-gritty with it with me, well, that's a personal conversation. But, life can take you to so many places. And that's what happened to me.
Yeah, well, okay. Well, let's turn our attention to the next phase of your life. You've been told by the AFL club your services are no longer required. It's been your life. You've moved back home. I would imagine you knew that you had a connection there with people, especially younger people. when did that really start to flourish, and when did you realise that you could make a real difference to younger people's lives?
I think, Matt, it just got to the stage where I had a story. Like you were talking earlier about the sort of the early phases of my life, successful in a junior career, then having a career but a short career, and then post that going through mental health issues. I thought there was a little bit of a story there to tell, and I think talking to our younger generation, not just Indigenous, but just our younger generation as a whole, that there are going to be phases during your life where you are going to be very successful. You are going to be down in the dumps. There are times where you'll be needing support but don't ask. So I just thought, so when I came back, which was in late 2003, and then, signed up with North Albury Football Club. Had a cousin there, Robbie Murray, who got me across there, helped get me across there, and a fantastic coach there called Corey Lambert. So they were really, really good for me in those years. I was there for like 2 years. We lost the grand final against Wodonga Bulldogs. And it was really good to get there. But I just thought I actually enjoy having a chat. And I thought my connection with adolescents, and especially the boys, that, like I said before, I had a story to tell. So when I first moved back, I got a job at Mungabba Aboriginal Corporation, Mungabarina, as the youth worker over there. And it was pretty much just having a chat to the young kids in school and talk about my story and all that kind of stuff. But during that time, Matt, I was still going through a lot of when you mentioned before about the 5 things of grief, I was actually still going through that myself. So I was trying to navigate that, plus being a youth worker and doing all that kind of stuff, mate. So I was trying to get my head around, okay, what do I really want to do or really want to get out of life post AFL? Because at the end of the day, not too many people get to live their dream, and that was my dream. So what am I going to do? So, and then I just started making sure that to every conversation I had was, truth telling. Well, the best I could do at the time, because I was still going through all that stuff. So I then moved on to numerous jobs after that, doing all types of stuff, like even working over at the Wodonga Leisure Centre and sweeping the basketball courts and being a lifeguard at the pool and all that kind of stuff. So and then working at Aware Industries with the disability guys over there and becoming a day manager, running the daily programs. And that was a massive eye-opener in regards to appreciation of life. You've got people with a diagnosed disability that come into work every day and they've got a smile on their face and willing to have a go. And it's like, I've just come in and I'm upset because I didn't have my morning coffee. Just make it really, like, when you think of it like that, and they're struggling. So they rock up and they're up and about. And it took me a good 5 to 10 minutes every morning to say, you know what, just have a look at these guys. Take a leaf out of their book, and they're having a crack. So I worked there for 2 or 3 years, and that made me really appreciate all the good stuff that's happening for me in my life. I've got no disability. I don't struggle every day physically or mentally in regards to a diagnosed disability, but these guys get on with it. So, and then living there, I got the opportunity to work for an awesome program called Boys to the Bush, which is a mentoring program for disadvantaged boys. And I'd really thank Adam DeManuel and Tim Sanson for the opportunity to grow in that position. And they're fantastic advocates for boys, young boys going through a lot of stuff. And some of the stories, Matt, are horrendous. So it's just putting some really positive men around them who have got life stories themselves. Like some of them, some of us have been through some stuff, so we understand what these boys are going through. So, and then, so I was then doing some of the cultural stuff and got asked to become the Aboriginal advisor for the organisation, which was really fantastic. And that really sparked a fire in me in regards to my Aboriginality. So I'd done that for, I think it was for about a year or 6 months. And then an organisation called Woomera Aboriginal Corporation approached me last year in regards to doing some cultural mentoring. So everything that we do is cultural focus. And a lot of the boys that I work with today are Indigenous boys that most of them are out of home care. So they're living with carers that are, some of them are non-Indigenous, living with nan and pop, so not living with mum and dad. So, and a lot of them have lost their Aboriginality. So, and when we talk about Aboriginality, it's talking about identity, who you are as an Indigenous person. So the boys that I work with, so what country are you from? You know, who's your mob? And a lot of them have got no idea, which is really sad. And then with that, you ask them what their totem is. They've got no idea. So a lot of them don't even know, you know, the meaning of our flags, the Aboriginal flag and the Torres Strait flag. So, and that to me is something's missing. So that's where in my role now is able to, you know, help these young fellas be culturally connected again. And that's getting around elders within the community who are our knowledge holders and sit and listen to these significant people, because like my dad said to me many, many years ago, because my dad's a knowledge holder, that once I go, I take knowledge with me. So, you know, and when you think about that, he's at his age now of, you know, in his you know, 70s. There's not much time left. So I need to spend as much time as I can with him to sponge, then to pass on to these young fellas. So I think I'm in a position now that, you know, I've got my own story. I'm being culturally connected again and spending some time with really significant people around that Albury-Wodonga community.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, history is messy, and the things that have happened in the past that have led to where we are today can be horrific, can be devastating, can also be positive as well. How do you approach it? How do you approach balancing the Indigenous culture with what we have currently and kind of marrying the two together?
Good question. Sometimes, Matt, as an Indigenous person, sometimes you got to wear masks. Yeah. So I can be with my family, my extended family, or whatever. I can actually be true self. But then I, you know, go to other scenarios or to other places and whatever, and have to wear a mask and not be my true self. So sometimes that's hard to balance. Where no matter what you do, you should be just yourself all the time. But there are times where you have to wear a mask and be somebody that you're not. So I talk very differently and act very differently around my family and my extended family and stuff like that than I do in the non-Indigenous community. I have to. But that's a balancing act. But I'm okay with it. There are certain people that aren't okay with it, and I get that. But you gotta pick your moments. It's not say pick your battles, but just pick your moments in regards to, okay, what do you have to do or say here to make sure that everybody feels comfortable? So, and I think I've actually got that okay now. But you know, being Indigenous, you know, even after, you know, the referendum this year, was a massive wake-up call. It was a massive wake-up call as a community, not just Indigenous, not just non-Indigenous, just as a community as a whole. Are we going forward? Like I thought we were going forward. I think we were moving forward in a lot of aspects, but that was a real eye-opener is, are we doing enough? Are we doing enough as a community? And I'm not talking about a broader community. I'm talking about the Albury community, the Wodonga community, like the community that you live in. So I feel that Albury does it very well. I've always felt part of and comfortable in my Albury community. And it's all due to my mum and dad and what they done. All the stuff that they had to go through and instill some really good behaviours, really good skills in regards to that. We made a choice to move here in the early 80s for you guys as children. Make it your world. Turn it into what you want to turn it into. And we have. All us kids are it's like successful in our own right.
Well, talking about achievement, we often ask what your biggest achievement in life is. And I can totally understand if you say that it's making it to AFL level, because, you're an elite footballer for doing that. But is it actually that, or is it actually the work that you do now with young people?
It's funny, like I keep on going back to mum and dad, because they when you talk about achievement, I think as siblings, and after the weekend we had highlighting dad's achievements, is the achievement is that all us as children can actually stand up next to mum and dad and say, you know what, we're trying to give back to you guys. And I think we've all achieved that. So, which is really, really cool. So, and then obviously the greatest achievement for children, and they're all successful in their own right. My beautiful partner now, Megsy, I'll give her a mention. We've been together 16 years this year, and she's been amazing for me, not just more personally than anything. Pull my head in when I have to pull my head in and stuff like that, which we do need sometimes. But she's always been there. But the achievement is, mate, making sure that, it was a massive achievement, the AFL stuff. But yeah, like even today, like I said, I've got a story to tell. So if I can change one young fella's life in regards to, you're actually worth it, mate. We can do something here.
Well, this would be interesting to ponder as well. So if you had your time again, obviously skill wasn't the issue really as to why you were delisted, because, you're an elite player. Yep. So I'm sure if you look back, you'd go, I could have done this differently, and this differently. But would you? Because you might not be here helping the kids. But if you spent more years in the AFL, who knows what would have happened? So do you think you would have done anything differently, or are you happy with what happened because it's resulted in you as you are today?
Yeah, that's a good question, because I've actually said to a fair few people, actually, would you do things differently? There's probably one thing I'd probably do different, was the fact that I wish I got a trade. I'm not a very hands-on. Like I just wish I just done a trade. But there was an opportunity with my sport at that stage. I actually didn't have an opportunity to do that, because when I was at Port Adelaide, actually, this was the first time when it sort of went full time. So you didn't actually have time to go and do a trade and stuff. But that's what I'm saying. But now they allow you to do that. So back then it wasn't that. So a trade would have been good, but no, not when you put it like that. Not really. I would have changed much more. It's probably in the earlier stages when it comes to, being a father and being a role model, especially to my eldest daughter, and I'll be very truthful here in truth telling, is I could have been a better dad. And I own that, and it's taken me a little while to own that. But and she knows that we have regular dialect now and regular conversations. Well, I've apologised numerous times in regards to my absence, my broken promises, and all that kind of stuff. And she's now really appreciated that. And it had to get to a stage where no, I wasn't a good dad. I was deflecting. I was like, it's everyone else's fault. But now it's like, yeah, we're really happy with, we have it. She still lives in Adelaide. We've got a distance relationship because she's very busy doing her thing. She's very successful in her career. She plays for Adelaide United in the soccer. She's under 19s captain for Australia.
Wow.
Plays in the under 23s. So she's very busy and very successful. So we don't get to see a lot of face-to-face stuff, but we yarn, we text, we FaceTime, all that kind of stuff. But in the early stages, I wasn't the best. So, and I just wanted to make sure with my 3 babies home that I am present. I am going to do what I'm saying I'm going to do. There's at times when you just don't want to, but that's just that's when we're tired and from work or whatever it may be. Sometimes you just got to say, well, I did promise that. I need to go out and do that. For example, yesterday my son wanted to kick the footy around. I just did not want to kick the footy around. But then the wife Megsy goes, you did mention to me a few months ago that he's not going to be around for long and you're going to miss out on these opportunities to kick the footy. So go out and kick the footy. And it only lasted 15 minutes. You know what I mean? But this is the stuff as a father that I've got to realise that our babies aren't going to be around forever. They are going to leave the nest. And then you're going to be missing out on those times. Where are they? Annoying me and wanting to kick the footy. It's Yeah. Good question.
What about the future, next 5-10 years? Do you see yourself working in this space long term?
Yeah, definitely. I think I've found a role, not just mentoring, culturally mentoring the boys, but it's been more connected with country, more connected with my elders and the opportunity to go and do what I need to do, not just personally but professionally as well. Like, for instance, we went up to Mount Pilot last Friday or Thursday to go and collect spears and clap sticks and go to the men's shed and skin them and start working on them and stuff like that. I'd never had an opportunity like that in my last role. There were times I could do that, but this new role is solely culture, and I'm allowed to go and do that whenever I feel I need to do it, which is fantastic. And I can see 5 to 10 years that I hope the program is so successful that I then have a couple of trainees under me. Hopefully boys that have been through the program, and they can start mentoring and be a cultural mentor as well. So I want my children to be happy, healthy in 5 or 10 years and moved out and been successful and doing their thing. The next 5 or 10 years, Matt, looks pretty promising.
Yeah.
Actually.
Oh, terrific. Well, we've only got time for a few more questions. I did want to ask this shameless AFL question, I guess, from the point of view that I'm just really curious.
Yeah.
Who's your AFL hero?
Oh, that's a good one. Well, it sort of went through stages of growing up when you got your favourite sort of player. So being Indigenous, I look at the stalwarts of AFL footy, and when you talk about Indigenous footballers. So I think about the Nicky Winmars, and I think about the Gavin Wanganines, the Polly Farmers and all those guys, just to the due fact that the stuff they would have had to go through in regards to racism would have been horrendous, but they still went out there and done their thing. But then when it comes to, me being a very proud North Melbourne supporter, can I chuck that in there? That I will, we've been through a lot the last few years, but that hasn't changed me colours. So, but then I break it down to my football club, my favourite players and stuff like that. So my number one sort of growing up was, when I got drafted the same with Michael Stevens. So Anthony Stevens was, one of my guys that I really looked up to and got to meet Anthony a few times through Michael, his brother, which I got drafted with. But then you got, I liked the hard in underplay, so the old Ben Cunningtons. Like, he was not the flashiest, but he just done his business. He went in there and done that. And then obviously the Wayne Careys and all that kind of stuff. But for me, Matt, it was just the Indigenous footballers more than anything. The ones previous that just went through so much would have been through so much crap.
Well, it's frightening to think, to be honest, that and massive changes happened just during that period. But it was only 4 or 5 years before you were drafted that the famous incident happened with Nicky Winmar at Victoria Park. Only 5 years.
I know.
I mean, 5 years goes like that. But I feel like there were huge changes by the time that you were drafted. And now, again, obviously it's completely different. But that's sobering to think that it was just 5 years after.
But I think the AFL have obviously, and I think, and I'll say something about the NRL as well after the incident up in Queensland. I think the guy got suspended for 7 weeks or 8 weeks for that racial slur. We got to think that we live in a society and communities now that it's so diverse with different cultures and beliefs and all that kind of stuff. Just let people go about their own business. Yeah, if you want to get involved and all that, make it positive. People want to go out there and be happy and stuff like that without being. And now we've got social media and all this kind of ways that people can really have a go at you. You can now take stuff home, with on your device. So, but I think the AFL and now the NRL showing the way that there's no room in society for racism in any aspect. And I got a little bit of that growing up as well. So, especially when I went to primary school. So it's come a long way, and I'm very fortunate that there's nothing better than having very close friends, non-Indigenous friends that really buy into, no, you shouldn't be treated like that, mate. No, that's not right. So, and really support you in that. So, and I've got that in my life, that I've got some really close friends that are like, no, mate, that's not right. And on the flip side as well, me saying maybe stuff that's not correct as well, and them saying, well, you can't say that, but you can say that as like, yeah, no, you're right. So nothing better than having family and friends like giving you to you between the eyes, mate.
Yeah.
So
Derek, it's been an absolute privilege having you in the studio. It's been absolutely terrific, very eye-opening as well, and fascinating. So thank you so much for sharing your journey with us, and wishing you all the best over the next few years.
Thanks, mate. Really appreciate your time.